Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Magic, Creativity, and Life. I'm Thorn Coyle, and today I'm talking with artist Maxine Miller. It was a terrific conversation. We talk about her time in Hollywood, working on shows like Angel, and her move to her own personal art and running her own companies, to magical practice, all sorts of things. In personal news, I am in the final stretches of my work in progress, which is a contemporary fantasy novel based loosely on the Thomas the Rhymer Scottish ballad. And I'm very excited. I'm going to be launching that on Kickstarter in May. That's the intention, with some really fancy special editions I'm working on. I'm working on a bunch of other projects in my publishing business and in writing for the year to come. And I want to encourage everyone, if you haven't yet, check out the deck Maxine did the artwork for and helped me design, my You Are the Spell Oracle deck. You can find that at Thorn Coyle Books, along with a bunch of fiction if you need an escape right now. Well, that's it for me for personal news, and let's dive in. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Magic, Creativity, and Life. Today, I'm speaking with artist Maxine Miller, who started her career in LA's punk rock scene, making graphic art for the music and movie business, working for rock bands and divas, from Batman films to Madonna's tours. Maxine created demon art for the hit TV series Angel and the movie Constantine, and did costume sketches and props for many productions. Feeling artistically unsatisfied, she then launched her own companies, Maxine Miller Studios and Celtic Jackalope, making art inspired by Celtic culture and witchcraft, reflecting a reverence for nature and the divine. She makes statuary, sterling silver jewelry, silk-screened apparel, and fine art prints. In 2022, she collaborated with author Christopher Penczak on the Magical Botanical Oracle deck, and is working on the forthcoming Celtic Lore Oracle, stated for a 2027 release. Maxine also did the art for my Oracle deck and book project called You Are the Spell. Maxine, welcome. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me.
So I ask every guest to start off with about creative roots. What are your creative roots? Was it always visual art from childhood on, or were there other art forms you were interested in? Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, I didn't want to be an artist. I wanted to be a ballet dancer. And I
Oh,
just threw everything into that. But it's such a restricted field. I had a few things going for me and a few things against. And I found myself at the school of the San Francisco Ballet one summer. And I was drawing dancers for fun because I maybe couldn't make my body do those shapes, but I knew what they should be, so I would draw them. And my roommate in the boarding house saw that, and she got very excited, and she said, "Could you paint one for me in a pink tutu?" And so I ended that summer with, facing down like the end of my ballet career before it really started. But I had a purse stuffed with money from
wow.
the girl that said, "Can I have a yellow tutu? Can I have a rose? Can I have, And I was not pleased about this, but it was just such a fork in the road. So
How old were you at that time?
I was 17.
Mm.
And I frustrated myself a little while longer trying to, break into the local ballet companies. But at the end of the day, I just really had to, I mean, it's not so terrible. It's the arts. But
Yes.
it was kind of the greatest tragedy of my life because I loved dance so much. But it has turned out well.
That's amazing. And the fact that you were getting paid immediately is also amazing.
Well, I think trying to make money with art is kind of insane. But there are several elements, one of which is just luck,
Mm,
because from the word go, people were giving me money.
hmm.
Somebody would see something I'd done, and they didn't even bother with, "That's so pretty." They would just say, "How much?" And that
Wow.
is just luck, because the world is full of beautifully talented artists that cannot make a dime, and
Yep.
hacks that just rake in the money. So whatever that is, I'm very lucky to have it, but it was not something, that is just kind of providential, I think.
Well, clearly, though, you connect with something that draws people in because I have several of your art pieces in my home. And, that was long before I hired you to do my deck and book art. And it's why I hired you to do my book art, right? Because you've got an eye and the way you work with detail is very resonant, I think, with people.
Well,
Um,
I like substance. In my early days of trying to get a break, long before I discovered witchcraft or anything else, I'd gone to an art expo in LA, and I was just looking for somebody to help me, or a direction, or something. And I spoke to a woman that sold art prints, and she looked at my portfolio and she said, "You have two options. One is to do faceless decorative art, lots of details and flourishes and pretty, but, without much depth to it. Or you could take what you do and go much, much darker and perverse, because there is an audience for that." And I said, "So what you're telling me is that I need to not be me."
mm,
She laughed and she said, "If you want to make money." And the reason that what I'm doing connects with an audience is because there is intention in it, there is thought, there is feeling, and uh, that feeling is expressed with details, but also symbolism. The choice of
hmm.
what goes into a. When I design a statue, it's a pet peeve of mine, like goddess statues. It's just a pretty girl, and then there'll be a little name plaque at the bottom.
Right.
And that's so hollow. I want you to know who that is from all the symbols that are worked into the piece, and the
Yes.
mood of it. So I think that's how come somebody might be drawn to something that I've done, as opposed to something that is just pretty.
Yes, like the first piece I bought from you was one of your Carriage Cauldrons plaques. And one of the reasons I love it is all the detail. Like at first, you just see this kind of beautiful, Art Nouveau Celtic knotwork with the goddess with her hair streaming and the giant cauldron. But then you pause and look closer, and there's all these figures pouring out of the cauldron, right? That
Yeah.
you might not notice at first. And that level of detail is what I love about your work.
Well, I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah.
That's kind of the thing, is if you make something that it just works on a pure design level, you know,
Yes.
to be attractive, but that is kind of where it starts getting good and interesting for me in the doing of it, is to have more to look at. Uh,
Hmm.
I mean, my father showed something I'd done. I mean, at this point, I'm maybe 18 years old or something. And he showed something I had done to a friend of his. And she said, "Oh, that's very nice." And he said, "No, look at it. And she said, I
Yeah.
looked at it, but I mean, it was a, a forest scene with all kinds of stuff going on. And she was like, oh, so yeah.
Right. Now I see. Um, so there's two things I want to circle to from this conversation. The first is the other reason I think your work is so resonant is that it's also you, right? You said early on, this person's like, well, you can go this direction or that direction, but you've gone a direction that is Maxine Miller, right? And I have that in my work. Sometimes I think, oh, I write, you know, urban fantasy filled with social justice issues. I also write, cozy paranormal mysteries. Like most people who write cozy mysteries only write cozy mysteries.
Right.
And so sometimes I say, well, gosh, I kind of write all over the map. But my readers and my colleagues say, no, you don't. It's all you,
Yeah.
right? Your voice, your values, it all comes through the characters' voices. And I feel like your art is very similar,
Um,
even though your art is more consistent in
well,
expression,
well,
I
yes
think.
and no. When I started, I did art cards for a company called Paper Moon Graphics, and it was
Mm-hmm.
all very soft and very sweet fantasy, unicorns and pierrots and all that kind of thing. And life sort of changed my direction and my style of art. Uh, so it's remarkable to me. Sometimes somebody will recognize my name from those things that I did so many years ago. And if you put that piece of art next to something, from along the way, it is a stretch that that's the same person. But at one point, I had a friend of mine moved to London, and around that time, my style got much harder, and my subjects got darker.
Mm-hmm.
And the next time we met, which was a couple years later, uh, I could tell she didn't care for it, and I
Right.
and I said, it's like one gets used to praise from one's friends. So I was a little ruffled, and I was, inquired. And she said, when I look at these, I see pain, and I don't like
Mm.
to identify you with that. So I prefer that you, do teddy bears and unicorns. And I just thought, well,
Right.
yeah, this friendship's kind of done then, really.
Right.
I mean,
Right. If you can't be honest in your
yeah,
art.
it's not
Yeah.
because you don't like my new stuff, but it's because you are not accepting of the person that is now in front of you.
Yeah.
Because I
Yeah.
mean, art defined is expression.
Yes.
What's the point of even doing this? Is to get that whatever is inside you in the form of
Mm-hmm.
ideas and craft out there, um,
Mm-hmm.
in front of an audience. So, you know,
Yeah. Years ago, back when I was just writing nonfiction, I hadn't returned yet to fiction. A colleague of mine said, oh, I would really like to write this book, but I still have to write these books that I don't want to write first. And I just looked at that person and was gobsmacked. I was like, why would you spend all this time and effort writing a book you don't want to write? Like I couldn't do it. And that's not to say that I'm not interested in commercial success,
no.
but it has to come from somewhere inside of me. And then move out from there.
Yeah, the other thing is, if you are really following your muse wherever they're going, that can cause bumps in the road. I mean, pursuing art is a fairly crazy thing to do in the first place. But I say it is difficult to like every Bob Dylan album or every David
Right.
Bowie album because
Right.
they are true to what they want to do. And they're like, I guess I don't mind if the audience doesn't get this one, but this is what I'm going
Yeah.
to go off and do.
Well, yeah, and speaking of Bowie, like I loved Tin Machine, and a lot of people were like,
Yeah,
what even is this?"
I went to that remarkable tour that he did with Nine Inch Nails, and
Uh-huh.
Trent Reznor said, "There's no way that I'm following you," and it was
Right.
kind of a low point in Bowie's career. Uh, so but they agreed they wanted to do it together, and Bowie went out there and did new stuff and deep cuts and absolutely refused to play hit songs, and
Yeah.
the audience was mostly younger people that had come for Nine Inch Nails, and they left in
Wow.
droves. It was
Wow.
just the most bizarre thing. And I'm a Bowie fan, but it was also, I have to say, for the jury, that it was a little difficult to be uh, given so much new stuff. Um,
Yes.
and it was like I guess the whole tour was like that. Like, he did not change his set. He was like, "No, this is
Wow.
what I feel like doing," and I mean, talk about brave.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it makes me think of Joni Mitchell saying, "No one ever said to Van Gogh, play a starry night again," you know?
Yeah, right. That's right.
Right. So, circling back to your style and the evolution of your style, I'm wondering how much your early graphic design, I mean, I see the echoes of your early graphic design in your current work, right? The kind of symmetry you work with, that sort of thing. What was it like doing graphic art in punk rock LA? I'm assuming in the 80s.
Yeah. Oh, the 80s. Well, it was uh how shall I say? I was cracking up in a manner of speaking, because I had been doing this very sweet, very light. I didn't even use black ink. That's how sweet this stuff was. I used a crow quill with sepia or indigo colored ink, and did these very soft and very sweet things. But that was increasingly not who I was. And so, within the constraint of all this work that I was doing for the card company, um, I kind of just couldn't do it anymore. Uh,
Yeah,
so I left, and then I had the sort of harsh, sort of whoomp. Now I've got no money coming in, and and so and so worthless guy that broke my heart, all of this. So I ended up in front of a therapist, and I had stopped working, and she kept saying, I just think if you could put all of this emotion into art, you would feel relief. But I was like, nobody wants to look at this. Nobody wants to.
mm,
You don't see yourself as Picasso, You see
right,
yourself as a person who made coin with Perot pictures.
right.
So, 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 cut to, I was introduced to a guy who had a punk zine called Scratch Magazine, and he said, "Oh, you're an artist." Yeah, he said, "You want to do a cover?" And I said, "Well, maybe. How much does it pay?" And he laughed, because it was punk rock, nobody got paid. So
Right.
he said, "There's no money, but you can do whatever you want." And that was the first time somebody had said to me, "You can do whatever you want." So I thought about it, and I ended up coming up with this pen and ink illustration of a woman's head being split in half with an angel and a demon figure fighting in the top of it. I mean, it was as far away from a teddy bear card as you could
Yes.
possibly get. And he loved it and he published it. And my father was horrified.
Yes.
But that was the literal beginning. I mean, my work from that point forward did not look anything like what had come before. And I was like, I don't know how I'm going to make a living with this, but this, I mean, the therapist was right. I was like, once I could open that channel, then I had much to say. And, and got back in there. And luckily for me, it rolled into the hairband era in LA, where there were lots of bands everywhere, and everybody
Mm-hmm.
wanted hearts with daggers through them, and dark angels and this kind of thing. So the work began to come back in.
That's great. And I'm just struck by this image of the woman with her head cracked open, literally then cracked open art for you again, right? And
Yeah,
it opens something new.
well, it was, it was informative. I mean, you surprise yourself, right? But it's
Hmm.
like I had never done anything like that. And when I was doing the cards, the aim is to please, in a certain lighthearted and pleasant kind of way. So I was kind of surprised that I had it in me, but it so reflected what I was feeling. It was just, it was just 100 green lights all at once. So this is what you're supposed to be doing. So
That's fantastic. Yeah. I mean, I've always followed my muse too, from art form to art form, from this expression to that expression. And it hasn't always been easy, but it's also, for me, been the only thing I could do, you
yeah,
know? Um,
yeah, there were a couple of
yeah.
years where I, in that sort of transition, I just went and got a job in a shop
Yeah.
because I don't know how to make money with this, and I know I'm not doing unicorns anymore.
Yeah.
So I'm just going to do something completely else to stay afloat. And as I say, once the music industry jobs started coming in, I got to a point where I had enough activity to get out of retail. But yeah,
Yeah. I mean, that's what I always did in my younger years. I worked a series of very weird, odd jobs because I always wanted time to do whatever my art form was in the moment, right? Mostly it was writing, but I did a lot of other things too. And, I'm thinking of writer David Goines once said something along the lines of sometimes you have to let your day job be your patron. We
yeah,
no longer have the Medici family.
yeah,
So that's your day job is your patron of the arts. And I really like that attitude. And I know a lot of creators who use that, you know, they create all the time as they work their day job. And I just think that's actually a powerful thing.
yeah. Well, the Medicis are also going to want to put their thumb on the scale as far as
Yes.
what you produce.
Yes.
So there is that. There is that too. Whereas whatever you bring in from doing, I mean, I bought one time. I bought a book on the habits of authors, and I thought once in a while I suffer from work block, and I thought I wonder if there will be a little gem in this that will kind of help me out. And I was I was dismayed to read that most of them that get up super early in the morning and work really really hard. Like
Yeah.
my
Yeah.
my guy was William Styron, who worked very little and got up very late, but nevertheless, it was interesting because there were people in there, T.S. Eliot springs to mind, that kept their day jobs and
Hmm.
worked many hours at their day jobs, that somehow that was even from the point where some of these authors, where they had enough money coming in where they could easily quit, but there was something about the routine of it that they liked. The I do this at this hour and this at this hour, and then these are the hours that I write.
Yeah, there's author and coach Becca Syme said something once that made me understand that. She said, and it's so simple, there are internally motivated people and externally motivated people. And that made a light go off in my head. Because
Yeah.
I'm very internally motivated, which is why even through, chronic illness, I can barely get off the couch. I still am producing,
Yeah.
right? I've just got this internal drive to produce and create. But I know people who really struggle. And for a lot of those people, the structure of a day job enables them to create.
Yeah.
As soon as you take external structure away, they flounder. They can't do it anymore.
Yeah, well, I mean, a deadline. It's because there was a lot of years of freelancing there, and stuff for the film or music industry comes with deadlines, and a lot of
Yeah,
times they knew what the album was called for 6 months, but they call you 3 days before they want the cover. You know,
right,
why? But
right.
that's how that works. And I think one of the reasons why I ended up with my own company was because I found it hard to live with the pressure, particularly if you were doing stuff for TV, because films, they have enough time sometimes to screw around, to redo things. Let's have three versions, and the first one was always the best anyway. But
Yeah,
the TV schedule was very harsh, and when I was doing stuff for Angel in particular, because that show I did many things for, it was sort of in the pre-digital age, so
right.
I'd be working on it till 4 o'clock in the morning, and a runner from the studio would be on my doorstep at 5 to pick it up.
Oh my gosh,
Yeah,
that's too
and that
much.
that prop works today. So there was always this tightrope of what if they don't love it.
Yeah, yeah.
So,
How long did you do that work in Los Angeles before you split off and formed your own studios?
oh golly, I mean, a long time. I will throw a dart and say 20 years.
Yeah.
Trickles in the beginning, and then there was a period where I just had a lot of that work going on.
Mhm.
And the one that got away was to do art for goth bands, because that's what I liked to listen to, but I just didn't have the same hookups to get the work,
Right.
because I would get most of my gigs from word of mouth. So if you did one heart, I used to say I threatened to have a portfolio that had nothing but hearts with daggers through them. There's a dagger through a glass heart for a band called the Lost Boys. There was a heart with bullets through it for Bang Tango. There was, I did a heart with a dagger through it with wings for a T-shirt for Bon Jovi, which they then went and sold to a bunch of other people, which was very painful.
Oh
But
my gosh.
well, it's a strange business. I mean, I did a Heart of Stone for Cher, and she took that artwork and she made it the logo for a Vegas TV special. And I learned a very expensive lesson that your invoice needed to read T-shirt only.
Yeah.
But the thing is on, and the phone rings, and I pick it up, and he doesn't even say hello. As my father just says, "Did you get money for that?"
Oh my gosh. No.
Oh dear. But I mean,
Wow.
if I would have wanted to sue her, it was, where's the money to sue her in the first place? But also, if you're putting out there that you're going to sue your clients, then that word gets out there too, and people don't want to hire
Right.
you. So artists
Right.
are very exploited in,
Yeah.
that milieu. But
Yeah. I mean, I see that with writers. If you don't have a good lawyer to go over your contract and give you, like, you know, those front scene cards with your name on it,
yeah,
and based on the series by no one knows, right? And that's where you make all your money, is in book sales. After that, yeah, it's tricky. So I'm going to switch gears slightly. When did you start? Because I want to get into the art you make now, but I want to ask, when did you start studying magic and witchcraft?
I fell into it, and it was a very. I mean, I mean, I liked Led Zeppelin. I went into the occult shop because Jimmy Page was interested in Crowley and the occult.
Right.
But it kind of washed over me. I wasn't. It was a long time before I picked it up, for reals. But I have a business partner for the company I have now, and we started with doing Scottish clan crests because he was
Right.
interested in his Scottish heritage, and he wanted a McFarlane crest, his own crest. It uh he made t-shirts. People loved those. Other clans said, would you do one for us? So we found ourselves with a little business. And at one point, they're fun to do. They're heraldic images, basically. And I said to him, this is fun, but, is there anything for this audience that we could do that would be a little bit more artistically interesting for me? And he said, well, you could draw Cernunnos. And I said, who's Cernunnos? I mean, I had
Wow.
no
Wow,
idea.
because your Carnunos is like
Well,
so amazing.
this was the funny thing, is that I said, okay, and then I go look it up. I'm not even sure if I Googled it because I was the last person to get online. I was not sure I trusted that magic box. But at any rate, I looked it up and I read just the littlest bit about it, and I was just like, well, I know him. I mean, I knew
Mm,
exactly what he looked like. And where did that come from? So I did that, and that was the door opening. Um, okay, well, you did that. You could do a triple goddess. So we started out with the icons that are the most known and the most popular. And just each successive thing felt like an old friend. So at that
wow.
point, I guess I better crack a book.
That's amazing, Maxine. And for people who aren't familiar with your work, I just want to say that your variations of those gods and goddesses are beloved by thousands of people, right?
Thank you. Yeah.
And it's amazing that you entered into working on those art pieces by way of introduction
Yeah,
to
it's
those.
it's pretty. It is remarkable. It amazes nobody more than myself, really. But
Wow.
if uh, uh, I went to Scotland recently with a Temple of Witchcraft retreat, and this is going to be fun. This is going to be interesting. We're going to look at fairy sites. We're going to look at old stones. and I was expecting to have fun and be inspired. I was not expecting to be knocked over sideways by how strong the connection was, because
Mm,
my ancestors that I know of were all Slavic, were all from
right.
Ukraine, and as far as I knew, there was not a Scots or Irish or English person in that whole family tree. But obviously, the idea of ancestors is more broad than that. But I mean, it's just funny because you have your intellect that knows these facts, and then you have emotions that wash over you. So
Yeah.
we went to some of these sacred sites, and I was just practically knocked to the ground with how much feeling came over me.
Hmm.
So, I was discussing that with Christopher, who knows a thing or two, and he said, you like the idea of ancestors is very broad. Which ancestors, and his mighty dead, uh, and I just thought, well, that has got to be what it is, because I just feel so connected to this.
That's
And
interesting.
it all seemed to be a lot less of an accident of fortune that I ended up
Yeah.
doing this work.
Wow. Yeah, my first time, I've been to Scotland twice and I love Scotland. And I I first went to England and thought I would have this huge response, and I didn't. Which was interesting, despite having been an Anglophile as a child and
Uh-huh.
all of that. But as soon as I crossed that border into Scotland and the land changed,
Yeah.
I had a response. And part of me wondered if it wasn't a similar response to the response I had. I was raised in Los Angeles and knew I needed to move to San Francisco. I'd never been there, but I needed to move there. And as soon as I moved there, I was like, oh, this is home.
Hmm.
And there's something about that, the fault line, the San Andreas fault line there,
Mm.
that felt similar, even though the terrain is radically different in Scotland. But it's that same kind of volcanic, craggy,
Yeah.
something's gonna happen any minute. And
Yeah.
now I live like you do in Portland, where we're surrounded by volcanoes.
Well, I lived, my whole adult life, up to I think I was around 50 when I moved here, and I never fit into Los Angeles. I just happened to be there, and I thank God I moved, because and it's funny because here there's a lot of California hate, uh,
Yes,
because people cash out and they come up here, and the first thing they do is complain about the rain. It's like, well,
right.
it's a rainy place. What were you expecting? But when I got here, nobody ever guessed that I was from California, because I just fit in here.
Yes.
And it so happens that I really love rain, so that was fine. But it was just, I would be hanging out with a group of people, and they would start talking about those terrible people from California, and I'd just be like, "Uh-oh."
Yeah, I had the same thing happen. And I always loved rain because coming from Los Angeles, when it was raining was the only time the air was clean and the weather was decent.
Well, the other thing, one of the other big takeaway from the exposure to Celtic and witchcraft traditions was the realization that it is all about seasons.
Yes.
And we have seasons. We have beautiful
Yeah.
seasons.
Oregon has more
LA,
Oregon has more distinct. There's far more
yeah,
distinct
LA
seasons.
is very beautiful and the same most of the time. And rain is rare, and now it's even more precious. But you
Yes.
know, things just look the same. I mean, if you garden, I mean, you can plant anytime you want, and the garden centers are open all the time. And it's just, it was, it was just another thing of getting here and boy, this feels right. I
Yeah.
mean, when it snows, I mean, I just am like just a little kid. This is
Yeah.
beautiful and magical, and but
Yeah.
I was doing all this artwork that was to do with seasons and the wheel of the year and how things change, and just not seeing it outside my window. So
Right.
yeah. So
Right.
that that was, a nice fresh jolt of inspiration coming here. So,
So, what is your, if you don't mind talking about it a little bit, do you have a regular spiritual practice, or is art your mostly your spiritual practice? What helps you day to day connect?
well, I would say art is probably, it's kind of like a conduit, particularly if things are going well. You get into the zone, as they say, and it's a meditation. My practice outside of that is really spotty. I would benefit from it being a little more disciplined, I think, but I'm, I'm not too good about the regular thing. One of the things that's nice about the Wheel of the Year actually is that it kind of gooses you into
Right.
reconnecting. Oh yeah, or oh, the moon's doing this. So so
Right.
when
Here's the solstice.
yeah, when I do sit down and connect, then it's very meaningful. But I sometimes will just, I in when that's the other nice thing about gardening is that it's not you're not doing a formal spell every time you go out there, but you are kind of, I mean, the garden is like a hyper sigil. You are worshiping just in the act of tending. uh,
Right.
and there's a million metaphors in a day's tasks out there. The cutting of dead wood, and the digging into the ground, is it's all sacred stuff. uh,
Yeah.
so that I mean that is probably the desk and the garden are my sort of two regular touchstones.
Yeah.
You know.
That makes sense. So when you're preparing to make a new piece of art, what's one of the things you do to connect in with that piece?
Hmm. Well, it's funny. There is, you are juggling art and craft, and they
Yes.
are they are slightly different animals. I will get an idea. It's like a soap bubble that lands in your outstretched palm, and I will make a little Spinal Tap type thumbnail that's 2 inches tall,
Right.
just to like capture that idea. And I will tell you, it is just the damnedest thing that it is so hard to capture when you then blow it up to the size you need to do it. Sometimes the magic is in that little 2 inch thing, and you're like, whoa, why can't I get that on the bigger sheet? But that inspiration and that little germ, um, is the most fun. Everything after that is kind of, it's the craft side, it's the donkey work, uh, and it's a kind of a tense time where you're trying to uh, capture your little shining inspiration onto the format that you need to do it. Once you've got it laid out and you're getting stuck into inking and painting and the crafty stuff, then you can kind of let go a little bit and go over to your unconscious mind. Like I will play music or an audio book or just something that's going in the background, the sort of the white noise, and then you can kind of almost fall into it. And when you're really doing something that is working and you're loving it, sometimes like the music will stop or the podcast is over and you don't realize it because you're
Right.
just so in there. Um, and those are the best times.
Yes.
Sometimes a piece is just just going to make you suffer, but most of the
It's
time it's good.
it's interesting. I mean, I love you talking about the art and the craft of it because I feel that way with writing too. And, you know, I love being in the flow when my subconscious is driving the bus and I've got my song on loop in my earbuds. But the thing that I'm struck by as someone who enjoys your art is calling some of the craft parts you do donkey work because the finished product sure as heck does not look like it was a labor. I mean, I know it was a labor
Well,
because
that's the thing.
the level of detail and all of that is incredible. But
Like, what is it with the
it's
tiny stars? I do it to myself. I love tiny stars, masses of tiny stars, but oh
oh, and then you
my
have to
God,
draw. Then you have to draw
you
hundreds
have
of
to draw
tiny
every one of those little
stars.
buggers. And I don't, I'm not anti-digital, but I'm not a digital artist. Everything
Hmm.
is old school, and I have a girl I hire to digitize my stuff for printing,
Right.
but nothing in the piece itself is done with computers. So
Yeah, I was surprised at the first sketches you sent me that actually were sketches
yeah.
on paper. You sent
Yeah,
me a picture of pencil on paper.
yeah. I mean,
That's terrific.
I was on a panel one time. What the heck was it for? I think it was one of the last fairy cons that they had, and I think there were five of us, and the subject was digital versus analog, and everybody else worked as a digital artist. A couple of them had daytime gigs doing digital art, but
Right.
when it came to the question was posed, what do you like better? Every single person said they preferred, old school tools. Uh,
Interesting.
and they're a really talented artist is going to make a piece of digital work that is compelling, but the lesser ranks of digital artists all have a very samey quality. It's like if you're putting in a shadow, they put in black. But if that is too simple, shadows are composed of loads of colors, so there are traps, that people can fall into. And I just, I just didn't relate to it. I didn't want to learn it. I was really stubborn about that. It, just possibly to my own detriment to need to rely on somebody else to do this or that to get something vectorized. But I just, even the tools that I use, the technical pens and things like that, they're little by little, they're all going away
Wow.
because of lack of demand. And I just,
I wonder if they'll come back though, the way um like albums,
I hope so.
pressed albums have come back.
I hope
And
so, but it's a real challenge because the paper stock is very degraded from what have used for all the years. And it's just always like, oh, the demand isn't there, you know.
right,
The technical pens I get, they stopped selling in America, so I have to order them from Europe or Japan. And
right.
it's kind of worrying. Um,
Hmm.
so I'm a little long in the tooth to start over with things.
Right, right. It's not that you couldn't, but it seems like it would be a huge amount of effort. And you already work, you're used to, your subconscious is used to that form. It's the
Yeah,
difference. Like I do some writing in with pen and paper, but that is not how my muse is used to working. My muse is
yeah,
used to working with a keyboard.
yeah,
Um, it's the channel you're used to working on.
yeah. Well, I mean, a keyboard looks different, but a keyboard. How long have we had typewriters?
Yeah,
That is still in its sense. That is still old technology.
yeah, that's true.
Yeah, but
So I have a couple more questions for you. One is, what does the word magic mean to you as an artist, as a person, as a gardener?
that's a big topic. How to define it is an interesting question because it's the same substance for all of those categories.
Right.
I I might in a way, to be pragmatic about it, I would almost call it that it's a hyper awareness, because
Mm,
a lot of what we would call magical is something that is already there, but you didn't notice it before.
right.
That you just uh, you just allowed yourself and your senses to perceive something a little extraordinary that was probably just there waiting for you to wake up. Um,
Beautiful.
but
I like that.
well,
I think
that's a
I
new
think that's
thought.
good. I think that's beautiful, and I think it's just right. And it leads into my final question, which is another big question that you can answer as large or small as you want. Currently, what is your why?
My why?
Yeah.
You know, it's it was Dylan that said you have to serve somebody, and I feel like service is the thing that elevates your life and your time. And
Yeah.
when I make artwork, I feel like I am in service to the gods, the universe, and also to my audience. If I
Yes.
am having a rough patch and just not feeling it, sometimes I will think about this little thing that is frustrating me. Like somebody will respond to that, you know,
Yeah.
um, because if it's all about self, that just doesn't feel good, does it? That doesn't go anywhere.
Right.
So if you just think of what you're doing with your art, it's like a gift that you're doing. Yes, it's for you too, and you are pleasing yourself in the making of it, but it's just a broader thing than that. And uh as far as gods and guides and all those magical folks that we hope are working with us, if I am of service to them, then it's harmonious with the universe. Man, that sounded grand.
It's it's
Absolutely.
just it's just right, Maxine. It's just right. So I think that's perfect. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you
So
for having me on here.
yeah.
Great.
So once again, I was talking with the amazing artist Maxine Miller, and you can find her work at maxinemillerstudios.com and celticjackalope.com. And as always, you can find me at thorncoyle.com. Thanks for listening. I don't know about you, but I got quite a lot out of my conversation with Maxine. I was really inspired to hear all the ways in which she leveraged her art, committed to her art, and followed her path, even taking risks when things didn't feel right anymore. Stopping art, well, not stopping art, but stopping trying to make a living with her art temporarily, getting a job in a shop, and figuring out how to regain her strong connection to art again, until finally she took another risk, formed her own companies, and is the successful, steady, working independent artist she is today. And the way she weaves magic and practice through it all is also inspiring, and it's the thing I try to do. And I wonder if that's something you try to do yourself. So thanks again for joining me. And as usual, you can support this podcast by joining my Patreon, Patreon.com/Thorn Coyle. Thanks to all my Patreon supporters. I couldn't do this without you. And I wish you 1,000 blessings and as much magic and creativity as you can hold.